Hello, bonjour, okit, everyone, and welcome to Nonprofit Connections. I'm Karen Ball, President and CEO of CCVO, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm speaking to you today from Mohkinstsis in Treaty 7 territory, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, and Métis Nation Region 3, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries and who have faced extreme and ongoing discrimination for generations. We are all treaty people. Today's gathering is presented by our amazing partners at ATB Financial. Thank you to our media partner, Postmedia, and our core supporters that make it possible for CCVO to strengthen our nonprofit networks and advocate for the needs of our sector every day. Please note that today's presentation is being recorded and will be available to you in the CCVO resource library in the weeks to come. Today's panel discussion will be followed by a Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions into the chat directed at Ask Questions Here. You may also direct any technical difficulties you may have to the chat, and we will endeavor to assist you. It's my pleasure to welcome today's amazing panel, starting with our moderator, Tara Lockyer. Tara is the Chief People Officer with ATB Financial, where she oversees human resources and team member programs, change management, communications, marketing, and brand functions. Prior to joining ATB, Tara was head of enterprise business engagement and implementation for global HR at CIBC and the global head of talent leadership and organizational effectiveness for Manulife. Tara holds a Bachelor of Arts in Business Communications from the University of Windsor, a diploma in adult education from St. Francis Xavier, and a certified insurance professional designation from the Insurance Institute of Canada. Welcome, Tara, and thank you for leading today's conversation. Ilda Songhurst. Ilda is the Director, Human Resources and Payroll with CUPS Calgary. She is a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of Calgary, is a certified trainer in situational leadership at the Barrett Values Cultural Assessment and Leadership Development Report, has change management certifications from Prosky and the University of Calgary, and is trained in workplace investigations. She's a great member of our HR community practice, and she's also currently completing her Master's of Executive Leadership from Royal Roads University and was recently awarded the Strategic Innovator Award 2022 from CPHR Alberta. Welcome, Ilda. Anne-Marie Pham. Anne-Marie is the CEO of the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. She brings a unique set of skills and perspectives, having worked as a diversity and inclusion lead for Spectra Energy and the City of Calgary, and as a trainer and facilitator for Human Resource and Skills Development Canada. Anne-Marie has a master's degree in public administration, a BA in sociology, and a senior HR professional certification with the Society of Human Resource Management. She is also a certified administrator of the Intercultural Development Inventory. She's a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award, a member of the board for the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, a former member of the board with CCVO, and a member of the City of Calgary's Anti-Racism Action Committee. Welcome, Anne-Marie. And Marcus Stewart. Marcus supports the work of the Food Share team and serves as executive assistant to Paul Taylor, who unfortunately was not able to join us today. Food Share is a food justice organization advocating for the right of food and working to challenge the systemic barriers that keep people from accessing the food they need to thrive. Marcus lives in the traditional territories of the Wendat, Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit in Toronto. And I apologize because these are nations that I don't get to introduce people from very often. But Marcus, we are really happy to have you. We know you're a bit of a last minute fly-in, but having spoken to you in the past, I think you'll be a great addition to this wonderful panel. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us for the panel today. And I'll now leave you in the more than capable hands of Tara Lockyer. Over to you, Tara.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Great lineup of practitioners. And I'm pretty interested myself because I'm asking hard questions, questions that often I get asked. So I'm hoping to get some insights and some new perspective from the panel today. So really great to talk to you. First off, I thought I'd just set some context in terms of what I'm seeing in the market to tee up a little bit of the conversation, because as an HR practitioner, the last few years have been something like I've never seen before. And I think many of us in HR say, we've seen it all. Well, I have not seen this. It is a new phenomenon with a lot of intersectionality in terms of things that are happening across the market. So just as a consideration, is the remote work. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a number of team members and employees across various organizations, both public and private, start to work in a very new way. One thing that we thought was not possible probably 5 to 10 years ago. And it's actually having a really interesting impact as we start to venture back into some of the markets and into some of our office places in terms of a changing perception of employees out in the market. Second to that, there's been an issue for me in terms of my team members that I work with around equality, because we've got frontline facing team members and corporate back office team members. And how do you create that sense of community and equity in terms of flexibility when we have very different environments that we're trying to support? So that's a huge new dynamic that we've been struggling with, quite frankly. And some, I see some populations still left behind. So throughout the last couple of years, women in general are leaving the workforce at the rate of 1 in 3 compared to men at 1 in 6. And we're, through research of working moms and working parents, we're starting to hear this terminology of struggling, maxed out, and just opting out of the workforce. So much so that we've had millions of workers leave the workforce en masse in ways that we've never seen before, and they may not all come back. What else are we seeing? Oh, this whole concept of the great exhaustion. I'd love if we have some time to get into what might people be doing around health and well-being, but this whole concept of exhaustion, people sensing that they've worked more than ever before, that the demands of the workplace, even though it's more flexible, have really entered into their home space and they can't disconnect from that. And in fact, the Gen Z, who's our sort of new folks coming up into the market for hiring, they're feeling it worst of all. So trying to support them has been challenging. And it just keeps going, right? This has led into this terminology of things that we're hearing, such as the Great Recession. So 14% of the workforce has left the workforce through the course of the pandemic, aren't seeing them come back. Microsoft did a recent study of 30,000 Canadians. 41% are still considering leaving the workforce. And 30% of businesses in Canada say they have labor shortages. It's like the perfect storm of talent and labor shortages out there. And yet the new worker preferences are here to stay. It's almost like there's been some validation and support to go out and ask what they've always wanted for, putting some additional pressures and costs, quite frankly, into the system. Not an easy time to be in human capital and to be working with people, that's for sure. So I'm hoping this panel today can offer some insights and happy to share some as we go along. So who should I pick on first? Anne-Marie has a nice, lovely smile today. So I'm going to lean over and say, Anne-Marie, given everything that I've just sort of rambled on about Great Resignation, the big quit, the quiet quitting, what's happening in terms of your ability to attract and retain talent for your organization right now?
Thank you, Tara. And hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this great panel. You made some great opening remarks, Tara, and you really set the stage for this conversation. There's no doubt that in our organization at the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and also with other employee partners that we work with across Canada, there has been, this pressure for us to really find meaningful ways to retain our talent, to keep our people. And one of the pieces for us that has been very evident is, especially in the not-for-profit sector, because many of us here are in that sector, is that we're used to being values-based organizations because of the impact that we have on our communities and the communities that we serve. But what's even more important now that we need to integrate and consider equally as important is to be values-based for the workplace ecosystem and how we treat each other, right? So gone are the days when you have to leave your baggage at the door and your whole self at the door. Now you bring your authentic self, your struggles, if you've got long COVID, right? If you've got a child with a disability, if you're struggling the work-life balance and the disproportionate impact on women and the intersection of gender and race and disability and all of these factors, I think they are worth talking about in the workplace. And if we are able to create an inclusive ecosystem, then our employees will feel valued, they feel like they are respected for who they are, and they will have a greater sense of belonging. So the beautiful thing about CCDI is that we're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we talk about this all the time, and it's a great way for us to be challenged on, are we walking the talk, right? Are we hiring for diversity? Are we reviewing our policies through an equitable lens so that it's fair, not just for some people, but for everyone? And so for me, it's very much about how do you attract and retain talent in our organization, is to be truly values-based and to enact those values through behaviors and have real conversations about the norms and the behaviors that we think are important and needed in our organization. When people are happy, they will stay.
Great. There's a lot in there, Anne-Marie, and I'm going to circle back, but I just want to give a couple of the other folks a comment. But I've talked to this with a lot of HR professionals around the pressures on leadership in this new environment to now have people bring their full selves into the organization and deal with things they might not have had to deal with in the past. So I'm going to put a pin on that, but I am going to circle back because I'm really interested in terms of how people are responding to that. But Marcus, I'm going to move over to you and just give you a chance. How's your organization experiencing sort of all of these new dimensions in the market, and how are you responding to them? How hard has it been? Anything that you've been trying to do to make sure you get and keep the best talent that you need?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me and inviting me to this panel. I'm not typically the one to talk in a public facing way anyways, on the work of FoodShare. So this is kind of new to me to be on a panel and talking about this kind of thing. But I think from my vantage point, I've listened to a lot of other folks from FoodShare talking about what we do. And something that stood out for me that Paul has actually said in the past, Paul Taylor, our executive director, he said that people aren't willing to accept shitty wages or shitty bosses anymore. And I would argue that they're really not able to. And issues that have kind of stagnated for a long, long time in nonprofits or just in workplaces in general have really kind of come to the forefront for a lot of people and contributed to this great resignation that's now being talked about. I would say a lot of work that FoodShare has done has kind of, I think, kept us at bay. We haven't seen staff turnover. And to be honest, we're not a very large charity, but I think folks who work with us, alongside us and within FoodShare, they do feel really connected to the mission, to our vision and our values. So some of the things that Anne-Marie just mentioned, I think actually are incredibly important to making sure that the folks that are involved are invested in the work. And I think we're also just very transparent about what we do for folks that work with us. We're transparent around our hiring policies. Everything from our pay grid is made public. In our job postings, folks know exactly which jobs are being hired for, what the rates are, little things like that. We've worked really hard over the years to kind of edit our HR policies and practices to make sure that we're bringing folks in with their eyes wide open to what we're able to do. But then I think we've also worked really hard to strengthen some of these things. Like we've tried to be incredibly flexible. We do all kinds of things like provide 20 wellness days for folks that they're able to take any time that they need, 10 paid sick days off. This includes folks who have permanent positions, but as well as contract employees, a lot of which who work through our social enterprise doing delivery work. And to be honest, folks who typically are doing that are employed on their own through things like Uber Eats and these kind of things, very gig work based. So for them to have access to sick days, it means that they're invested also in the organization and being employed for longer terms. We have 4 weeks of paid vacation to start. We have things like Indigenous cultural practices leave so that my Indigenous colleagues are able to go out to their communities and connect with their practices that are important for them to be able to come into the workplace more as a whole person. There's a lot of things I think that I could list here, but we also worked really hard over the pandemic to make sure that FoodShare was what we call a living wage employer. So this, I think, again, sort of like I said, some of these issues can stagnate for a really long time. And I think one issue that's particularly prescient in Ontario and in Toronto is the cost of living. We've seen this increase absolutely dramatically for folks, and our minimum wage here is just over $15 an hour, but that's actually not living wage anywhere in the entire province of Ontario. So if we're employing workers who are only paid minimum wage, they're actually not even able to live near the workplace. They're not able to have time to connect with their families. They're not able to prioritize things like affording healthy food for themselves. So we really worked hard to make sure that we're a living wage employer, and Ontario Living Wage Network is something that's really interesting. I'll plug their work here, and they kind of help lay out how they calculate the living wage and for various regions, and yeah, provide some good guidelines for us. So I think that's some of what we do.
There's a lot in there, Marcus. A couple of things that really sort of stuck with me is this whole concept of values. And I know, Anne-Marie, you said this is too. Purpose-driven, values-based organizations are doing well in this environment. As you know, there's a competition for flexibility and pay, but really people are being driven towards purpose and value add work. And you're starting to prove that theory in spades, as well as having some pretty forward-thinking mechanisms in place. So Ilda, I wanted to invite you into the conversation as you're listening to your colleagues sort of talk around what they're doing. Any particular mechanisms your organization's thinking about or has already put in place when it comes to worker retention, attraction, or even a sort of engagement and performance of the organization?
Yes, thanks, Tara. I mean, really interesting work, Mark, for sure at FoodShare. I would say at CUPS, and specific to what Anne-Marie said earlier, I do think that purpose and values-driven organizations really are making the difference. We are seeing people really focus on that and really creating a space where when you connect to the purpose of an organization, you can bring your whole self to work. So I think at CUPS, some of the initiatives that we've really been focused on this past year is a really strong workplace initiative that was spearheaded by my HR business partner. And she really wanted to focus on wellness in the workplace, appreciating that physical wellness is only a small element of actual wellness within the organization. You know, psychological wellness, I would say, is a really big component. It speaks to also that being able to bring your authentic self to work. We are whole beings, and I think considering our physical and psychological well-being is important. We did weekly initiatives from a wellness perspective. We drew attention to spaces and things that people can do to help support their wellness. We highlighted our employee assistance program. We talked about our benefits and encouraged people to utilize benefits. But we also talked about small things like putting down your devices and going for a walk at lunch and just really giving people a sense of what it means to consider your entire wellness. As was mentioned kind of in my bio, I also became certified in the Barrett Cultural Values Assessment. And so we actually delivered that assessment at CUPS. And we're currently right now working through, we've just met with all of the groups, and we're trying to kind of theme a lot of the data that has come forward from our teams, really having some in-depth discussions about what's going well, where are there opportunities, and how do we bring that together for the entire organization, really centered in that values-based thinking. As Anna Marie said earlier, I strongly believe that in the nonprofit sector, we definitely are a bit more, well, definitely altruistic. And I think we really are connected to values in the nonprofit sector. We see it, people join our organizations because they have a connection to the work that we do. They have a connection to supporting the clients that we support. And so I think that really is very values-based, and we're definitely seeing that connection. So we're wanting to really talk about that and make that more of the forefront of the work that we're doing, tied to the purpose of why are we here, and what are we trying to support the community with. So yeah, I think focusing on giving employees a voice has definitely been a huge space for us at CUPS. Through our wellness workshops, through the cultural work, we've done workplace world cafes where we've brought our teams together and just talked about different initiatives or different questions that we're wanting to have answers to, and really looking to connect with employees. We're just moving into strat planning for our next strategic priorities for the next 5 years. And we're actually doing it robustly with the entire organization. So connecting with our frontline folks and really bringing them into that work, which I think really makes sense. You know, we want people to be connected to the work that we're doing. And I think connecting them to the building of strategic priorities makes sense. So yeah, I from my perspective in the work that we're doing, I think that's where we're really wanting to give people a place and a voice within our organization.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ilda. And I know, Marcus, you sort of commented on this. People almost feel like they've been given permission to finally vocalize things that they've deserved and have been wanting for a long time. Anne-Marie, I just want to loop back because, Ilda, you've started to talk about wellness programs, and it sounds like you're doing some work in that space too, because mental health and wellness was a big issue through the pandemic as people had some additional stressors, but I think just the isolation, quite frankly, of the pandemic. What are some things you're doing in your organization to bring that health and wellness to your team members?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tara, for asking. And I saw Marcus and Ilda provided some great concrete examples, and I love that so much. I think that's a lot of good takeaways. At CCDI, we've also done a few things that are very concrete. One, for example, I mean, we have a very diverse workforce, very connected to community. And after the murder of George Floyd or the rediscovery, confirmation of Indigenous graves, at each of those moments, we can feel that our people were not well, they were not doing well. So we hosted listening circles, right? And we really provided a safe space for people to talk about how this impacts them. You know, and the murder of the Asian women in Atlanta, and then the murder of Black people again earlier this year. Really, it's just one thing after the other, And we have to recognize that our people are humans and that these news out there really impact them. Their safety and the safety of their family and their children and the members of their community. So really listening, being a good leader, I think for me is about giving space to really hear with an open mind and an open heart the concerns of your people, and thinking about what we can do differently and what we can do better to support them. The other thing too that we have are, you know, we have reviewed and created 8 HR policies in the last few months. And one of them, for example, is around our statutory holidays. We're across Canada. Some provinces have 8 days, some have 9, some have 10. We've equalized them, so everybody now gets 10 stat holidays. And we have flexibility within that, so that if you're not Christian and you'd rather not take Christmas off or Easter off, you can work that day and take another day off that is more meaningful to you based on your religious or cultural practice. Also, Alberta did not, make this mandatory, but we chose as an organization to close for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, because a lot of our employees wanted to make the time to learn more about this day and attend some of the events that were available in their cities. So we closed our doors and we encouraged people to participate, learn, and connect. And then they had to tell us back on that day, what did you do, right? So it wasn't a day off to go shopping. It was a day off to learn about truth and reconciliation and connect with Indigenous communities. And we have unlimited periodic sick days at CCDI. And so what that means is if you need to take a day off, a day or two, or up to 3, you don't need to explain yourself. There are mental health issues that some of us face. There are issues that we need to deal with our dependents. There are, physical health issues. There are workload burnout issues. And if you have to always explain yourself all the time, it becomes complicated. And we have this option too, where, I'm not doing well right now, so I need a few hours to lay down, but I'll come back later, right? We have the opportunity to do that at CCDI because of the nature of our work. And I know it's not always possible for people who have to be at, bank branches or, delivering service every day to clients. But I think whenever we can, we trust our employees and we give them the responsibility to take care of themselves, and we create the environment to make it possible.
It warms my heart to hear about all of the progressive HR policies you're putting in place, Anne-Marie. And here's, I don't know if it's a wives' tale that there's a backlash to that. Have you had any issues with unlimited sick days, or have you had any challenges implementing the policies? None. That's
no, I mean, after 3 days, you need to have a note
okay.
or something. So that's why we call it periodic sick days, right? Unlimited periodic sick days is 1, 2, or 3 days.
Yeah.
And that just is what people need just to disconnect for a little bit and take care of themselves and then come back to work, usually more refreshed and more productive.
Yeah, I love this concept of trust and reciprocal trust, that if you give it to your employees, it's going to come back in spades. So it's great to see you.
Yeah, they become more productive, Tara, and they're more loyal to the organization, I think, because we trust them.
Yeah. And I believe it theoretically. I'm just glad to hear some people are adopting it so we can see that. At the beginning of some of your comments, you also talked a lot about some of the diversity and inclusion and equity challenges that we face through the pandemic, as if the world wasn't bad enough. We have George Floyd, we have the discovered graves. And we're asking a lot of our leaders. So I do want to go into our leaders a little bit in terms of how are we supporting leaders in the organization to deal with some pretty complex issues. And I'm going to bug you, Anne-Marie, first, just given your space that you work in. How is CCDI supporting leaders and teams around like having these difficult conversations, the listening sessions? How are you supporting your team members through that?
Yeah, so, we work with a lot of employers across Canada. We have almost 700 partners across Canada. And when needed, we will do touch base calls with them and figure out, what's going on and where do they need the support. Sometimes it's a one-on-one call. It's very private. It's like almost a coaching conversation. Other times there is a recognition that the leadership team requires training and support. So we might go in, or our sister organization, CCDI Consulting, would go in and actually speak with the leaders and really encourage them to understand, what are traits of inclusive leaders? When we talk about courage or collaboration or humility or cultural intelligence, these are some traits that have been well researched and surveyed all over the world by Deloitte and Catalyst. What does it mean for them, right? How do you manifest courage in an organization. That means you have to be vulnerable, and you have to, probably start with your own story of when you didn't have courage, and when you took a stand and you were trying to be brave, to be, not a bystander but an upstander, right? So very much conversation with leadership. I think sometimes it takes time for leadership to understand it. And then it takes more time sometimes for leadership to enact it, right? So you have to give people the space and the time to learn, to reflect, to build their language, and to build their courage, the backbone, so that they can go out there and be inclusive leaders and really connect with their people, and the diversity of their dimensions, and the complexity of the issues that they bring to the room. But I think as a leader, you also have to find that balance and be very clear that diversity is an asset for an organization. It is not a liability, right? And that's part of our message, is that there's so many great ideas and perspectives and better ways of serving communities and doing the work that we do if we actually listen to our people and our volunteers and the clients that we serve, with that open mind and open heart, so that we are at the end creating better outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to remind our participants today too, since you've got such a great panel in front of you, they have agreed to share some materials and some tools and things to put in your toolkit. So make sure you keep the questions coming, because even if I can't get to them, we'll see if we can curate some material that can help support questions that might still be out there. Ilda, I'm going to turn back to you. You started the conversation talking about mental health. Any other sort of HR practices that you've tried to apply in the organization as a result of the last couple of years, or maybe even something you had sort of implemented even prior to the pandemic that has proven to be really rewarding in your organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Tara. I would say, I think COVID definitely gave us some not so great things, but I think some of the positive things that came out of COVID is that we did get an appreciation for the flexibility of work and supporting employees in flexibility of work. And I think Anne-Marie spoke to this earlier about just appreciating that we all come from different places. Some of us have kids, some of us don't, some of us have, elderly parents that we're supporting. All of our circumstances are very different. And so we did have to push our workforce, obviously, to be working remotely initially. And we have decided actually to adopt a remote platform to allow people to have that flexibility to work at home or to work in the office. We also had people who wanted to work in the office. And so, we also created spaces to allow them to be there full-time if that's what they wanted. So really, I think having that flexibility from that perspective. I also think, as we've mentioned during the pandemic, we also saw a lot of things that were racially difficult to deal with. And I think we at CUPS appreciated that this was a space that we had not been as actively participating as much as we wanted to. So we did start a social justice committee who is helping us to work and do work on the DEI initiatives that we need to do within our organization to really create that diverse workforce that we need to have. I agree with Anne-Marie, there is such value in diversity, and I think we have work to do. I think we're in a good place at CUPS, but I definitely think we have additional work to do. And I think CCDI is a great partner from that perspective. In you can reach out to them, you can get access to information. They have amazing workshops that you can attend. And so at CUPS, we've been working with our partners to support us. We also hired an indigenization specialist, which from our work with clients, we do focus, there is a focus on Indigenous clients within our organization. And so I think being able to work with our Indigenous specialist really has allowed us to broaden ourselves in that space. We've had elders come in and meet with our kiddos in our Child Development Center. We've done work both from the Indigenous Day. We were able to celebrate Indigenous peoples and their ways, and we brought forward speakers, which I think was really amazing. And then we took a different turn through Truth and Reconciliation Day and really took a really hard look at some of the difficult things that have transpired and how can we be advocates and support, which I think was really well received in our organization, and we continue to develop in those spaces. It's important. I think the days of us being able to not be a part of these really impactful times in our world, we need to be present, we need to be engaged, and we need to be involved. So CUPS is definitely moving more into that space. We were really excited to get to walk in Pride this year, which was fantastic for us. We hope to continue to do that moving forward. And so I just think we really want to create a space where our clients feel comfortable accessing services with us, but we also want to make sure that our employees see us as a well-rounded, diverse organization that they feel comfortable and want to be a part of as well, and where they can authentically bring their whole selves to work. So I think that's been a really important focus for us.
Yeah, lots of great comments in there, Ilda, and some good suggestions. I'm just going to go back to the front end of your commentary on flexibility. I like to think of this as the gift of COVID and the challenge of HR professionals everywhere. And I have a lot of conversations with my colleagues and network across the board in terms of what have we lost in this remote environment and what are we prepared to do to get it back? So I had some really interesting dialogue with my leadership team yesterday, and we had some folks in from Deloitte talking about moments of serendipity. I think I just like to say serendipity, but this concept of, you know, when you come into the office, there's a bit of a vibe. And whereas in this environment, you might have to schedule a meeting, sometimes you forget to say, oh, Marcus, I had this idea. There's a point of connection there. Or funnily enough, one of the things I've seen happen in the last few months as we start to return slowly is people come in and embrace people they've never seen in person. So although they've created relationships virtually, there's just something that seals the deal when you meet in person and you just want to physically sort of embrace and touch and joke and celebrate and have fun. So would be interested from the panel in terms of what are you doing to activate some of those things that are really challenging to replicate in a virtual environment? Are you putting any kind of guardrails around your workforce in terms of how them coming in or them making those points of connection? Ilda, I don't know if you want to jump in and just sort of finish off some of the things that you're doing there, and then I'll go to Emery and Marcus, because this one is one that I'm really struggling with, and I know HR professionals sort of the world over are really challenged by this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's been challenging. I think it will continue to be challenging. I think we need to look for new and innovative ways to connect from a hybrid perspective. I do think there is times when we just have to make the decision to say, you know what, we need to come together. And so I think the one thing that we've done at CUPS is we have maintained a lot of our health and safety and PPE measures, because we want to make sure that when people do come in and we are connecting in a meeting place, that people feel comfortable to, you know, come in and we're all wearing masks. We try and maintain that distancing. We don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable coming on site. So we've maintained a lot of those practices. We have moved back to in-person training just because we have heard from people that they have appreciated that. So when and where we can, we've done those things. But we've also done virtual world cafes. And, you know, it's not the same as maybe getting together and actually all having a mug of coffee and sharing pastries, but we were able to still get together. We utilized technology from a breakout room perspective and whiteboards, and just tried to do things that were a little bit innovative with the tools that we have available to us. Yeah, so I think, you know, it will continue to be difficult, but I think there's lots of really great things going on out there in the world from that perspective. And I think whenever we see something that's new and innovative, we try and incorporate that into how we do things. So
yeah, thanks for that, Ilda. I don't know if you can see this. We've put stickers on our
Tara, are you still there? I think you're frozen on my end.
Yeah, she looks frozen. Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Did I freeze?
yes. You're back though.
I was doing some show and tell. I was just saying on our name tags, we do stickers. Green is you can hug me and shake my hand. Yellow is I'm okay to be in the room with you. And then red is I'm here, but I'm wearing a mask and 10 feet away. So you don't have to declare it every time. Just a comfortable way to sort of set parameters in the workplace. Marcus, anything from your organization's perspective in the spirit of flexibility and getting people into the office, that's even a conversation around moments of collaboration and collision?
It is interesting, and I am really interested to hear also what other folks have to say, because for Food Share, this has been it's a challenge. We have folks who work in our food distribution social enterprise that we've predominantly set up our office so that it's accommodating for their safety, which means a lot of folks like myself have been almost exclusively off-site for a very long time now. We have other groups that are involved in growing food and selling food at markets and all kinds of things. Each team has various safety requirements, and it is an evolving conversation, I have to say. We've been really slow to bring folks back together. There hasn't been that serendipity for me. I think that it has been a lot of virtual space. I think some of our spaces that we've been really intentional around to have creating long before the pandemic have translated nicely, I think. I know particularly we have a group for racialized managers to get together and talk about their experiences and various things that work or don't work for them. And this kind of relates to some of your previous question. So I know that's been in a really important space for some folks. Similarly, we have a Black caucus for Black members of self-identified Black members of Food Share's team from various levels of the organization who get together and talk about things. And throughout the past few years, their work and input has helped us shape a lot of our policies and procedures that have helped guide us through COVID, but that also relate to our mission, vision, values, and other things. So the work has kind of continued in that way, with all these spaces kind of translated to virtual. And I know a lot of folks do want to come together again, and I hope that we can soon. But it just hasn't happened exactly for us yet.
One of the things I heard for organizations who have parts of their organization that can't be isolated and have to be in person was just how creative they are getting. I just thought I'd share this story, and it's not, I don't think anybody's industry, including mine, but this concept of truck drivers who had to come to a particular loading dock, pick up their trucks, get their delivery schedule for the day, and then go home. One of the things that they adapted over with the pressure of flexible work environment was working with, I'm going to say the CRA, because it probably is a tax implication for them to bring the work vehicles home so that they're starting and ending their day at their house, to give them some of that flexibility that some of us lucky folks have been experiencing in other ways. So just even thinking really creatively around equity and flexibility and some of the practices that you might want to adopt. Anne-Marie, would love for you to jump in on this conversation in terms of flexibility, back to the office, any things that you're trying out at CCBI, and how are they going?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. And I appreciate hearing and learning from the rest of the panel as well. There's flexibility, both, I would say, internally and externally. So I'll focus on the internal piece first. We miss those conversations by the water cooler, and we miss, the idea generation that sometimes happens when just 2 or 3 people organically get together. So that's for sure something that, as you say, Tara, what are some of the things that you've lost? I think that's maybe one piece that we've lost. We try to make it up by having lots of Teams messaging. And we created specific groups, so a social teams group, a group for special projects, for special events. So we try to encourage, continued conversation virtually as much as possible. We also started a French conversation cafe virtually, because some of our bilingual colleagues need to practice their French, and we thought that would be a great way to connect. And we're sort of relaunching a social committee this week, actually. So really taking into account where our folks are located and the kinds of activities that they're comfortable in doing. So I'm sure we'll have some social activities virtually, but in the last 6 months, I've traveled actually to a number of cities. And every time we connected with our staff there, we had lunch there, and it was so nice to reconnect with them. So even though you may not reconnect with them for work, you can reconnect with them socially. The Toronto office, we've got Office Wednesdays. So if people want to come and join and socialize and work where they need to, like the whiteboard and jot down some ideas and brainstorm, they know that Wednesday is the day to have those meetings with their team. So we're trying to adapt and continually evolve. And if something doesn't work, we'll revisit. So I think that's part of the ongoing process. But with our clients, we are definitely doing more in-person events. We are seeing that clients are a lot more interested in having in-person events. We are doing community of practice events in 9 cities right now. And we are seeing some interest in people coming in, but not as much as before COVID. And when we checked with some of our employers, they were saying, sometimes it's the COVID concerns, it's health concerns, but more often than that, it's actually that they're so busy right now. They're using this pace of, working virtually, that an extra 1-hour drive to go somewhere, to an event, to park, to attend the event and come back, seems like it's harder for them to fit into their schedule, which is very interesting. So I think that some standards and norms have changed in people's mind because of how they've been working during COVID. So not everybody is ready to go back to the office or want to meet in person for multiple reasons.
Yeah, an interesting discussion I was taking part in around how people have moved to task-oriented working through the pandemic in this virtual environment, as opposed to strategic, creative, networked, collaborative working. And it's going to take a while to break that habit. Just as a story, I had a manager in the office and had 2 meetings canceled, and she felt guilty. And I'm like, well, why? You're a pretty senior manager. That gives you the opportunity to make connections with your team, to provide a line of sight strategically on where you're going, to do some strategic work. Why do you feel guilty? But I think we've created a population of folks in our organization who are living by the 30-minute Zoom call. And I think it's going to take a while to break that down. So we have to, even in the virtual environment, if that's where some decide to stay, we'll need to rethink about the type of work that people are doing, and will that benefit us in the long term. Just one last reminder, I'm being cognizant of time here. If folks do have questions that they want to come in, there is just add to the chat, ask questions here, whatever your questions are. I'm gonna pivot a little bit on some of the questioning, because I thought this one was a really compelling question. In terms of what are you hearing from employees that they want? That's a gap to what we can offer. And I'll share my experience, maybe because I'm a banker. It's a financial example, but I know, Marcus, you talked about the standard of living. But we've had a lot of employees with the cost of living increases, but we are under a wage freeze through the government of Alberta. So we actually can't change base salaries for our team members, even as the cost of living is increasing. And that's putting a lot of strain on our ability to retain, but also engage our team members. So one of the things that we're starting to research is giving team members the choice of how they want to be paid. Do you want to be paid in dollars, in a type of share, in a type of wellness benefit? So just even though we can't increase the total compensation package, by providing flexibility and choice. Might that be something that's of value to team members? So what are some of the things that your team members are asking for that are a bit of a gap in terms of what your organization can offer already? And Anne-Marie, I'll just turn it back to you if there's something you can think of in that line.
It's actually such a timely question, Tara, because like Ilda, our organization is going to go through a strategic planning process soon. You know, as we were doing a SWOT analysis, that came up, you know, as an opportunity for us is, you know, how do we, in this age of great resignation, how do we make sure that we retain our people and really listen to what they're saying and see what some of the things we can do to address that. So our teams, and this is the nature of the people that we hire as well, but they have a lot of lived experience, they have a lot of insights, they have a lot of ideas, they have a lot of connections. And one of the things that they're asking for, and we're doing some of that, but I think we can do even more of that and do it better, is how do we consult with them and how do we organize opportunities for co-creation, co-design, co-ownership. And I say that not just the words, but really like meaningfully, how do you listen to people so that you can create better programming, right? If you're on the ground and you're working with clients day in and day out, you understand clients' needs and we want to hear those needs. And the thing is, it's not just good for the organization, but when an employee has a sense of ownership in a project, right, in their team, in the department, they're going to be much more engaged. So you'll have way less presenteeism. I'm there physically, but I'm not really there. You're going to have connected employees who feel like they, you know, we listen to them, right? And another things that we've talked about too is cultural asset mapping. So essentially understanding that each employee comes with a wide range of assets, right? Like for me, for example, you know, I'm from the Vietnamese community in Calgary, right? I know a lot of Asian community organizations and leaders and connectors. Are we leveraging that at CCDI to connect with Asian communities, with Asian speakers, to amplify the voices of the concerns from the community via the employees as the broker and the liaison and the connector? So I think for us, it's about that. Is the team is asking us how we can work with them more meaningfully. And for them, that's part of the total rewards package. Okay, especially for a nonprofit, when you can't deal with the increased salary or benefits because you're on a tight budget, there are other ways to engage people meaningfully and celebrate and recognize them.
I love that. It makes me want to come work for all of you, the strong value, purpose-driven organizations and sort of leading edge HR practices. Marcus, anything from your organization that you're sort of being challenged with right now in terms of what employees are asking for and you haven't quite figured out a way around it yet, or how to solve that problem?
To be honest, we have a slightly different approach, and sometimes it takes some, like even our benefits provider, off guard, because I think often there's this like race to the bottom, and then when we come forward and we say, you know, we're looking at finding ways to actually like increase how much people can spend on their dental, and yes, we will pay for it. We're always trying to find ways to, because to be honest too, I do think in some ways, maybe like a government or there is a lot of like, we perceive that there is a lot of pushback sometimes, especially for charities, when they see that wages within a charity are occupying a large portion of the budget. And when we were transitioning to a living wage and we thought, you know, maybe there will be some funders that pull their funds because, you know, oh, it can't be done, it can't be done. And we were kind of preparing a lot of advocacy work around why it's important to be a living wage employer. And kind of the opposite ended up happening for us. We published some information about us being a living wage employer, and suddenly we got donations from all across the city of Toronto, people saying, thank goodness that FoodShare is paying their people and paying them well to do the work that they're doing. And I think like something that we're kind of interested in, and these remarks are not prepared, and I don't know if I'm like breaching any whatever, talking about some of the stuff, but we're interested in ideas, even like a 4-day work week. This seems to be working well in some places. What would it mean to actually transition our workforce away from a 5-day work week to a 4-day without necessarily cutting compensation in any way, shape, or form? What could this look like for the future of work? And how can we bring this to folks? Mind you, it opens up a massive can of worms, both with like what the legislation says we can and can't do, and what we think we can actually action in an equitable way across all the different departments and programs and everything that FoodShare does. But it's something that I think, because we have a board of directors that are seriously engaged in the mission, vision, and values, we have a management team that is also very much engaged, and leadership that's willing to prioritize some of these things. Like I haven't seen anything that we're like, oh, this is really the things that have been seen as difficult. And yes, there are other areas that we can still grow and learn and do much better. It's like, we're really trying to do it. Nothing has been completely ruled off the table, and where, one question opens another and then another door. And we're just like, well, maybe we need to advocate more for this in a different space in order to get it done. And that's kind of what's led to some of that work for us.
No, love it. That team member experience too creates an experience for the partners that you work with and the community that you work with, and itself reinforcing to some extent. So it's great to see how it even turned the perception of the organization as taking care of themselves first so that they can take care of others, and the support that you got for that is awesome. Ilda, anything you want to add to this conversation, just in terms of, is there an outstanding challenge or something creative that you're looking at, whether it's the 4-day work week, as we sort of look at ways to support our workforce even more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have been throwing around a bit of a discussion around the 4-day work week, not broadly in the organization, but I think as an HR team, we've been having that discussion. We've definitely been having the discussion around benefits, which continues to be, just like every other cost, is continuing to increase. And I think, how do we give the best for our employees while still being conscientious of the cost and how that impacts our employees? I think this year, particularly with inflationary rates being so high, we did have to look at how can we be innovative. And I think even things such as, how do we help support employees from a learning perspective? I think, being nonprofit, we're very lucky to have access to the Alberta Job Grant. And so we've tried to encourage that for employees for, maybe we can't change the wage, but are you wanting to work on your master's, for instance, and can we support that in some way for you? Or are you wanting to take a certification, and can we support you in doing that? So trying to look for ways that we can broaden what we can offer our employees outside of, increasing wages, which isn't always a possibility for us.
Yeah, so many great ideas. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the panel for peppering me with some great ideas to take back to my organization. And Karen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, panel. I feel the same way. I have a little, a short list that's rapidly becoming a long list of things to consider for our own organization. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Ilda. Thank you, Marcus. And thank you so much for leading us forward, Tara. Our sector and communities are made stronger and better through your leadership and contributions. We're so grateful for the time you've spent with us today. Thank you to our ongoing supporters and series sponsor, ATB Financial. And thank you to the CCBO team, and specifically Mary Polychronis, who's working hard behind the scenes along with her colleague Marissa Barber on everything you do today and every day to help build the capacity of nonprofits. We love hearing from you, so please take a moment to complete the short survey that you'll see in your inbox in a follow-up email, and look for great links and reads and more information on today's topic headed your way soon. Thank you again, mostly to every single person on the call today, everyone that attended, for all that you do every day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I hope you join us again soon. Bye for now.